Horse in Theta 7.
Damn it, you destroyed my Blackstone Fortress.
What are you guys playing?
Paradox Billiards, Vostroyan Roulette, 4th Dimensional Hypercube, Chess, Strip Poker.
I'm not even going to comment on that, but why are you playing the strip poker part? Pio is already naked.
Why did you have to ruin our game? I was trying to relax after the debacle of the female Custodes retcon. I was winning too.
Ah, yes, I saw that video. I was wondering what you had in mind while you were writing it. You seemed pretty angry.
So it takes the last drop of my blood. I will see the galaxy freed once more. And if I cannot save it from your failure, Father, then let the galaxy burn.
Nothing much. Alright, Pio, let's get to the video at hand. You weren't even in the last video, so you can't complain this time.
You say it almost as if I choose to be here. I'm more an hostage than a guest.
Silence before I lock you in the basement again. Editor, bring up a picture of the Raptor Marines. That is a Raptor Marine from the Raptor chapter. I meant the Raptor Marines. Turns out that the Raptor Marines we have to talk about today don't have a picture to show. Sorry for that, you will be paid this time.
Worth it.
They shall be my finest warriors, these men who give themselves to me. Like clay I shall mold them, and in the furnace of war forge them. They shall be of iron will and steel in muscles. In great armor shall I clad them, and with the mightiest weapons they will be armed. They shall be untouched by plague or disease. No sickness will blight them. They will have tactics, strategies and machines so that no foe can best them in battle. They are my bulwark against the terror. They are the defenders of humanity. They are my space marines, and they shall know no fear.
What do we talk about today?
Today I will explain the biggest case of wasted potential for lore advancement that ever took place in 40k, Pio. I will introduce a lore that isn't even talked about that often. We will talk about the missing link of evolution between Firstborn Marines and Primaris Marines, and after that, we will do something a bit special.
Give everybody a reason not to hate Erebus.
No, I don't think that's possible even with my level of lore knowledge. He is a lost cause. We will try and rewrite the choppy and corny and to be honest barely canon lore of the Primaris Space Marines, using the lore we will introduce in the video. And we will give a version of it that hopefully, if it was used for the Primaris, would have made sense from the beginning, and would have made them a lot more lore friendly than they were when they were introduced, or than they are even now.
And you can do something like that?
I mean, I did solve the mystery of the missing Primarchs in the first lore video we made. I think I can manage.
Shameless plug to another video of yours.
Yes, you know how much my brain was fused to complete that research. Watch that video, it is worth it. Our story, for once, begins during the Horus Heresy. To be precise, it begins after the end of the Dropsite massacre and the full unfolding and beginning of the rebellion of Horus and his traitor brothers against the Emperor of Mankind, after Horus was corrupted and swayed by chaos that wanted to move war directly against the Emperor, using Horus as a pawn. The Raven Guard, the legion under the command of Primarch Corvus Corax, has suffered one of the biggest losses in the Loyalist Legion war against the traitors. In fact, they had lost more than 75,000 Space Marines in the Dropsite massacre alone. Corax, in dismay for the almost total annihilation of his own legion, fled to Terra with only one thing in mind: having vengeance against Horus for the lives of his sons he had extinguished in such a cowardly move, and in such high numbers. Corvus Corax asked for help in rebuilding his legion directly to the Emperor of Mankind. Not an easy man to reach in that period, as the Emperor was already fighting the hordes of demons inside the human webway that had become breached by Magnus the Red by mistake. The Emperor wanted to help Corax, but he couldn't do it himself, as he was busy in the throne room to keep the legions of demons that wanted Terra at bay. So, He decided that Corax himself could rebuild his own legion. The Emperor revealed that the original technology and strain of DNA that was used to create the Primarks still existed, hidden in his old labs under the Himalayan mountains. Corax could use that technology and that DNA to rebuild his legion, but the Emperor bestowed on him one last gift. The Emperor imprinted in his memories part of his knowledge and research on the creation of the Primarks, so that Corax could use the Emperor's knowledge to rebuild the Raven Guard.
So the Emperor could just do that with all his knowledge from the beginning?
Yes, he's the Emperor of mankind after all.
He could do that, but he couldn't convince Lorgar that he was not a god?
Listen, he can implant his knowledge into the brain of intelligent people. If you are Lorgar, you are stupid by default, okay? Corvus was accompanied by members of the Raven Guard, a contingent of Mechanicum specialists, and different custodians that served as guardians of the technology for the Emperor, to locate and enter the extremely well-protected gene lab he had used to create the Primarks, even if not without casualties. Corax secured the technology, the info he needed, and the pure DNA of the Primarch project, and moved to the world of Deliverance to start the rebuilding of the Raven Guard. Primarch Corax, Chief Apothecary Vincent Six, and Magos Genitor Nexin Orlandrias spent weeks working with the knowledge of the Emperor, the data they had recovered, and the technology of the lab that they had brought with them, all to create a new reservoir of stable Astartes gene seed to create new Raven Guard Marines, as the majority, if not almost all of their gene seed, was lost on the East 1-5 Dropsite massacre. But there was a caveat. The gene seed they managed to extract from the pure Primarch DNA was purer than the original strain. It was developed and engineered down to the individual cell, and the Marines it created were purer as a result. Using an accelerated development schedule, 500 aspirants were implanted, with excellent results. They were named the Raptors, or Raptor Marines. They were bigger, stronger, faster than normal Marines, purer. Duels were performed between veteran Marines of the Raven Guard and the newly implanted recruits of the Raptor Marines. To say the results were unexpected is an understatement. The Raptors lacked experience, it was visible, but they beat even veteran and experienced Marines in the duels end-to-end. And even another kind of legionnaire of a different legion lost to them. This one not really from the Raven Guard.
Don't tell me.
Yes, the Alpha Legion infiltrated the Raven Guard by posing as dead Marines when the Raven Guard escaped from East 1-5. We'll talk about it in a second. Not only that, but their method of creation didn't even need progenoid glands. In fact, the gene seed could pretty much be cloned from the strain created by Corvus Corax, with the knowledge and technology of the Emperor. The limit in creation of Marines now wasn't gene seed, it was for once aspirants. They could create Raptor Marines so fast that they could rebuild the entire Legion in a matter of years, maybe months.
Reactions and strength are better than a mature legionary. I've never seen anything like it. Which is fine for an armored unarmed combat. Those advantages will be much reduced when they have their power armor. I've been thinking about that, Lord. The new Mark 6 suits. They're far superior to anything else we have, except for a few artificer suits for officers, and even they are pretty bashed up. We can't implant the experience and guile of a veteran into these men, but the new armor and their advanced systems will go some way to helping with that.
I was thinking the same. These are not just recruits. They are the start of something new for the Legion. I have told Six to progress with another 100 implantations. If we can successfully scale up, you'll have a fighting force within 50 days. Commander of Recruits doesn't seem to reflect your role properly.
The Alpha Legionnaire that had lost against one of the new Raptors noticed how threatening this was. They could create superior Marines and faster than anybody else. If they started, it was something that could shift the balance of the entire war.
The Raptors, thought Alpharius, looking at the line of warriors nodding encouragement to their companion as he returned to the rank. If Corax was right, and the Raptors would be battle-ready within 50 days, Omegon had to hear about this. Alpharius had held off making any reports so far, but this was newsworthy of the risk. Whatever the Alpha Legion Primarch was planning, he would have to move swiftly if he was to counter the resurgence in the Raven Guard's fortunes. Corax seemed to be content with what he saw. Alpharius watched him leave. Just before the Primarch passed through the large doors from the hall, he stopped and looked back, deep in thought. A frown creased the pale skin of his brow, not of anger, but of concern. It lasted only for a few seconds, and Alpharius was left to ponder what had passed through the Primarch's thoughts as he gazed back at the young Raptors.
The Raptors were deployed for the first time against a Word-Bearer's intelligence outpost called Cruciax, A small attack against a small enemy, a baptism of fire, so to speak, to test their capabilities in battle. There too they lacked experience, and it was visible. Too eager to charge in battle, too enthusiastic in throwing themselves against the enemies. But even there they outperformed veterans. With experience they would become feared warriors from the traitorous enemy. But at the same time as Corax was experimenting and rebuilding the Raven Guard, the Alpha Legion wasn't just staying there doing nothing. They knew the potential of these new Marines. They wanted two things: to stop Corax from creating them, and to get the technology for themselves. So, they waited until the Raven Guard had achieved what they wanted. A new kind of gene seed was created, but in the meantime, they were fomenting a rebellion between the tech guilds of the planet of Kiavar. The Forge world at the moon of Deliverance, where the laboratory of Corax was, circled. Meanwhile, they were amassing Alpha Legion forces not far from the planet. Using the knowledge of the Dark Mechanicum, a gene virus was created using extract of demon blood that was delivered to the Alpha Legion operatives in the Raven Guard. They had 3 orders in total now that the plan was almost complete. Copy the entirety of the gene research that Corax had done for the creation of the new gene seed, contaminate with the gene virus the pure strain of Primarch DNA so that whatever Marine created with it will mutate into a monster, and then destroy the last of the Raven Guard gene seed in the lab to condemn the Legion to certain extinction. The Dark Mechanicus Magos confirmed that the virus could be easily extracted from the strain of DNA once it was acquired, so the plan was followed to the letter from the Alpha Legion infiltrators. The next 2000 Raptor Marines created from the Raven Guard were a failure. All manifested hideous war mutations after the gene seed was implanted. Only 1 out of 10 was even able to hold a bolter in its hands. Some even needed to be imprisoned after the mutations had started, as they would lose control of their own minds. At that point, the rebellion of Kiavar started, and they were aided by Alpha Legion forces that arrived masquerading as Raven Guard forces, bearing the 19th Legion badges, insignias, and their armor. But all of this was only a diversion, so that the Alpha Legion operatives already present in their ranks could steal the Primarch DNA and all of the gene data acquired during the research and its breakthroughs, and to let them destroy the Raven Guard gene seed left in the fortress. The objective to steal all info and research about the Raptors was successful, and they were stolen by none other than Omegon, that had been on Deliverance from the beginning, to secretly manipulate the events as needed. But the destruction of the Raven Guard gene seed was prevented by the mutant Raptors, that were freed and tasked by the dying Chief Apothecary Vincent VI to protect and save the future of the 19th Legion.
They might be warp mutated, but they are Raven Guard all the same. Reminds me of the Unfleshed from the Demonculaba book.
Why did you mention her? Now people will ask for a video on it incessantly. The mutated Raptors were successful, fighting off the false Raven Guard and overpowering the Alpha Legionnaires posing as it. Deaths happened on both sides, but in the end, the mutant Raptors were victorious. The gene seed was protected, but the infiltrators that had recovered the gene tech and DNA sample had finished their task. They left all material at a designated point of the lab, and then moved to the landing pads still under cover to leave, only to be confronted by Commander Agapito of the Raven Guard, that had suspected there were infiltrators in the Legion. The 3 Alpha Legion soldiers ended their lives to not be captured alive and interrogated, while Omegon, disguised as a Mechanicus super soldier, recovered the DNA and copy of the research, to then sneak away undisturbed with both of them. At that point, Corax, a force of Imperial Fists, and the remaining Raven Guard with every Raptor squad who was capable to fight, launched a counterattack against the traitors. This then started a campaign that evolved until they won against an Emperor's Children planet near the Kiavar system. Corax couldn't go further with these experiments. The remaining Raptors were accepted into the Legion, and they would fight until death side by side with the Raven Guard brothers. But the research was halted, and then Corax ordered it destroyed so that it could not be stolen or replicated. Various mutated Raptors would fight in the Horus Heresy, some even killing loyalists that saw them to avoid a purge of their own Legion and their Primarch. The research that had been stolen by Omegon was manipulated by him and Alpharius before being sent to Horus, so that the research on the secrets of the gene seed could never be discovered. Fabius Bile would spend thousands of lives without ever achieving anything, while the twin Primarchs kept the real research for themselves.
Did Alpha Legion just do a double Alpha Legion moment?
Yes, first they tricked the Raven Guard to acquire a copy of the research and the DNA strain, and then they tricked Horus to keep it for themselves.
Too much Alpha Legioning in this story for my tastes.
Yes, as usual with every Alpha Legion story gets convoluted. Even one of the infiltrators we follow is called Alfarius, but not the real Alfarius, just one of the false ones. Anyway, that is not important. From this story that is in the 18th book of the Horus Heresy, named Deliverance Lost, we learn that a superior strain of Space Marines already existed, the missing link. The line doesn't go Thunder Warriors Firstborn Primaris, it goes Thunder Warriors Firstborn Raptor Marines Primaris. And now we enter the interesting part of the video, because it is renowned that the lore and introduction of the Primaris were a disaster to begin with. They clash with the tone of anti-technological advancement of 40k. They were poorly explained, their lore is corny, with Belisarius Cole just making them in 10,000 years, and needed a good number of rewrites before it became even acceptable lore. So, now Pio, we will try to write our version of the events that brought to the creation of the Primaris, and we will try to use the Raptor project and the Raptor Marines to make it make sense. What do you think?
Ah yes, because it makes so much sense that random tech priests just made thousands of super space marines in the labs of Mars, made new and revolutionary technology, armors, weapons and vehicles for them, and evolved the Emperor created Genseed to a superior level, all by going unnoticed for 10,000 years. On Mars! Who wrote this shit? The same guy that wrote Female Custodians?
Yes, even if that was rewritten a lot, Pio. Anyway, let's start. We'll try to keep the same general events and characters. So, Belisarius Cole and Robute Gilliman as the central people behind the creation of the Primaris. But now, we will try and use existing lore to justify them. So, keep in mind that anything from here is our personal version of the story. You decide if it works better than what the official lore did to justify the Primaris Marines. The story of their creation will start in the same way. After the Horus Heresy, Robute Gilliman realized that the long war had just started for the Imperium. The great enemy wasn't the alien anymore, it was chaos, it was the heretic, it was corruption and the warp, and the demons and the chaos gods that were hiding in it. Knowing that the enemy now was on par with the Imperium, between demonic forces and corrupted traitor Astartes, Robute reunited with his surviving brothers once again, not to introduce them to the Codex Astartes at this point in time, but just to discuss how to protect the Imperium in the future, as now Astartes fighting Astartes will become normalcy. And no more a rare event, like it had been during the Rangdang Genocides and the Heresy. Robute, being the more tactically inclined of the Primarchs, found a solution, even knowing that not many of his brothers would like it. The Astartes were not only their sons, they were weapons, a weapon the enemy now possessed in great quantities. And like every weapon, they could be bettered, and they should strive to better their marines starting now for the long war. Some of the Primarchs were appalled by such a thought, improving the marines and the Genseed, the work of their father the Emperor. Who could do such a thing? How? And why should they allow it? From Corax only silence arrived. Silence that was broken only when Rogal Dorn asked him what had come from the experiments to rebuild his own legion. A thing he had so much strive for that he even met the Emperor during the war in the Webway. The answer of Corax came with the retelling of the events of Kiavar to all of his brothers, about his experiments, the knowledge the Emperor had imprinted in his mind, about the Raptors and the interference of the Alpha Legion in corrupting them and making the project fail. This would anger all the Primarchs present, except for Robute and Vulcan. Corax would add that after the defeat of the Alpha Legion, he had ordered the entire research on the Raptor Marines destroyed, and all the technology sealed away, so that no more monsters could be created from his failures. Robute raised his voice, reducing to silence the entire room as he walked to the center of it. He talked with Corax, expressing how much such knowledge as the one in his mind might be the key to the Imperium and humanity's victory against the great enemy. Without surprise, Corax refused to repeat the research and use the knowledge of the Emperor, still ashamed from the failed creations of his own making. At that point, Captain Agapito of the Raven Guard stepped forward, revealing that he had suspected Alpha Legion infiltration. He had made a plan to counter any sabotage to the research the Alpha Legion could make. Him and the now defunct Chief Apothecary Vincent VI had made a copy of the research that was stashed together with the technology that they had used for the experiment, in a secure data slate, in case the Alpha Legion was successful in deleting it or tampered with it. He chose not to destroy it even if the Primarch ordered it, all to honor Vincent VI and the Raptors that saved the future of the Legion by defending the Genseed. It would have been an insult to their memory to destroy the research and its results. The rage of Corax filled the room, as the Marine kneeled in front of his angered Primarch, his actions loyal, even if his Primarch did not approve of them. Robute was fast to calm the Primarch down. This was a miracle, not a curse. Then he ordered that the technology used in the experiments for the Raptors had to be unsealed, and the data slate with the Raptor research on it recovered and given directly to him. Robute, like in the original lore, would deliver the Saint Primus Portium, the container with the pure strain DNA of all 20 Primarchs, to Belisarius Cole. But this time, not just the container. He would then took all the technology to make the Raptors, together with the data slate containing the research Corax had already done and concluded, using the knowledge and memories the Emperor had implanted him with. Belisarius was given the same order.
Astartes are a weapon of the enemy now. We need something more. Something to protect mankind in the millennia to come. A new generation of Marines, evolved from the knowledge my father left to us. I entrust you with this technology, Belisarius Cole. Study the research of my brother and my father. Make the sons of the Primax superior to the bastards that now serve the archenemy. You have helped my father create the Astartes. Now help me make them superior to those that now serve chaos.
Belisarius was also entrusted with all the battle data that Corvus and his Raven Guard had acquired during the baptism of fire of the Raptors against the Wordbearers, before the original strain of DNA was made useless by a demon-imbued virus. All events from here proceed in the same way. All Primarchs either disappear or are put in stasis after wounds sustained, and all of this continues while Belisarius works. Belisarius studied the Raptor research, but he was no Primarch, no transhuman super soldier, no immortal warrior, nor the Emperor of mankind. Progress was slow, and hardship common in understanding or reproducing the results of the original research without the pure strain of original Primarch DNA. The one contained in the Saint Primus Portium was pure, but it had already been broken down into the 20 individual strains. It was not on the same level than the original Primarch DNA. In the end, though, after millennia of research, Belisarius would succeed. He would recreate the Raptor Marines' gene seed, not only of the Raven Guard, but for all the Loyalist Legion that still serve the Emperor. Faster to reproduce, more stable, the Marines born from it superior to their normal brethren. The gene seed yet was not completely pure. The mutations of every son of the Emperor and their Marines were still present, just not as prevalent to compromise stability to extreme levels in some cases like they were before. At that point, Belisarius will turn to the combat data. He studied them, and then he realized these Marines needed superior technology to be unmatched on the battlefield. Better weapons, better armors, better vehicles. So, he started studying the data to provide them with the technology and means to fight optimally on the battlefield, creating the Mark X power armor, the bolter rifle, and the rest of their cannon at the moment equipment. He was an Archmagos after all, and he came from an age of understanding, unlike all those that came after the Horus Heresy. When Cadia fell, all events play out as normal. Robute reaches Belisarius and orders him to unleash the new Marines he had created. He had made only sparse thousands this time, as it was all he could keep hidden on Mars. But he explained that with the technology of the Emperor, he could clone the gene seed like it was done with the Raptors in Origin, directly from the DNA strain of every Primarch. And that he was able to create Legion-sized forces in just a few months. But he added a warning. Belisarius wasn't the Emperor or Corax. He had just followed and already concluded research with technology he could barely understand, and DNA that wasn't as pure as the one used in the original research. So they could do this a limited amount of times before each individual DNA strain of every Primarch will start to degrade and create inferior and more unstable gene seed. So, they started creating gene seed and Marines to found the 9 Legion-sized forces of the Unnumbered Sons, the same ones that served as support forces during the era Indomitus. But after that, to avoid compromising the pure strain DNA of the Saint Primus Portium, the original method of creating Marines would enter into full effect. Every single superior Marine created now implanted with 2 progenitor glands, like their firstborn brethren.
To the Space Marine chapters bloodied and besieged in the Dark Imperium, we bring reinforcement. To the chapters lost in valiant duty or driven to destruction, we offer rebirth. To the enemies of my father's empire, we bring death. With these words, I, Robute Guilliman, Lord Commander of the Imperium, son of the Emperor of mankind, declare the Indomitus Crusade.
And from there, Robute would rename this new strain of Astartes, but he could not give them the name of the Raptor Marines. His brother Corvus would be ashamed of that name. So, they needed a new name, a name befitting of the next generation of Astartes, the new inheritors of the Primarch legacies. a name that will show that they are closer to Primarchs than any Astartes that came before. He will name them the Primaris Marines. The Primaris were the new sons of the legions, created from a research and technology handed down directly from the Emperor of Mankind to the Primarchs, and from the Primarchs to Belisarius Cole. This will make the end of the Emperor into the entire creation of the Primaris a lot more prevalent, diminish the involvement of Belisarius that still created them, but did so literally by following a written and completed research that he still had to adapt to the means he had. It will justify where all of these new marines and technologies came from and why. And all the same, we would end up with superior marines, like Guilliman wanted, to defeat the enemy that now had the same weapons of the Imperium.
You really have a lot of free time to think this stuff up, do you?
I am an Italian nerd. This is my bread and butter. This is my version of how the Primaris could have been made canon using lore and events that existed long before they were shoved into the lore, to make people buy their entire line of Marines again, and put the name Primaris Marines under copyright, because that is the entire reason the Primaris Marines exist. But at least I can hope my version makes more sense than the original one. Their introduction and lore was, and still is, lackluster, and out of the scope of the universe. At least they introduced that a civil war almost erupted because of it, and if it wasn't for Guilliman that is a son of the Emperor, it would have been firstborn against Primaris. That is the best part of it, as it makes sense in the lore of the universe, so I will keep it for my explanation too.
How often the fandom had to fix Games Workshop fuck-ups?
More often than you can imagine, Pio.
I actually like the female custodians. I'm happy they always existed.